And you are live, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 27th, 2022 Board of Selectmen meeting. This open meeting of the Northborough Board of Selectmen is being conducted remotely, consistent with the February 15th, 2022 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Board of Selectmen are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Northborough Board of Selectmen to meet entirely remotely, so as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Let's go around the virtual room and confirm that we can hear everybody, just in the order of who I assume I've seen. Scott Rogers, are you there?
Present.
Fantastic. Jason Perot.
Present.
Kristen Wickstead.
Present.
Julianne Hirsch.
Present.
And I'm Mitch Cohen. I am present. And staff, I know we have John Kader, Town Administrator.
Present.
And we also have Becca Meekins, Assistant Town Administrator.
Present.
Scott Charpentier, DPW Director.
Present.
And we have Bill Liver, Police Chief. I almost changed your department there.
Present.
And host, as always, Dave Parenti.
I'm present.
Chief. All right. We also have Northborough Cable with us, assisting with the technical stuff. All right. Let's begin. We have a couple sets of meeting minutes of June 13th and then June 16th. Would someone like to make a motion? I will note that Di from the office emailed out minor corrections to those earlier, filling in a couple of names and so forth. So nothing substantive relative to the meeting minutes that the public has seen, but we'll take a motion on the amended versions.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the June 13th and 2022 meeting minutes as amended and the June 16th meeting minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Kristen, seconded by Scott. Any discussion before we vote? Let's see. Let's go backwards. Julianne, how do you vote? I didn't hear an answer to that, Julianne.
Yes.
Okay. Kristen?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. All right. Next up, we have a public hearing. I will open the public hearing, which is to consider an application from GNI 9. We had some discussion earlier whether that's an X or a 9. I'm going to assume 9. Forbes Whitney LLC to amend the existing above ground storage license for the premises located at 30 Forbes Road by increasing the on-site storage of flammable and combustible liquids, flammable gases, and flammable solids. I do want to make a quick note before we bring folks in. We had a little typo in the first version of the agenda that the word increasing was substituted by the word decreasing. That was then amended and so forth. And we will decide later whether that's going to impact any part of our decision-making process for the night as to how to proceed. I'm sure we have, I think, at least one person, if not multiple, to bring in. Dave, you want to take care of bringing them in?
Working on it now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Dave, I don't know if you have anyone else coming in, if it's just you.
No, I do. I should have about 4 other folks in the.
Just give me the names and I'll bring them in.
Sure, George Gould,
Okay. Go ahead.
Rachel Weiskin,
Rachel, got her.
Alex Bowden,
I assume that's Ed. Here we go. Yep,
and John Eisenberg.
got him.
Waiting for one more camera to turn on if the person so desires. All right, well, welcome to the public hearing, the Northborough Board of Selectmen meeting. Dave or anybody else, do you want to give us a quick summary as to what you're looking to do? We've all seen the application and the materials submitted by town departments also.
So good evening. My name is John Eisenberg. I'm a fire protection engineer and a chemical engineer with ARUP, A-R-U-P, working out of our local office, which is in Boston. I'm a consultant to Aspen Aerogels, and in this case as well to CBRE, who is the owner's representative for the building. Aspen is the tenant, as you know. So I've been working with the team over the past couple of months to figure this out in terms of what increase to flammable liquids and the other materials are needed to support Aspen's business. And so we're here represented across multiple disciplines on the team tonight to basically answer any questions that the board may have on the submittal package.
And now I'm going to interrupt real quick. I'm very sorry. I forgot to give you the name of Brianne. She's also in the queue. She's representing the owner, Brianne Tamura.
Yeah, I thought I recognized her name, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't bring her in.
Great, looks like she is now in.
Thank you all.
Sure. Anything else you want to present us with before we go around and see if there are questions from the board before the public?
I think just to add that there are a number of attachments that were included with the application for the license increase, including a site plan, including an explanation from Aspen on basically the business need that's driving the application for the increase. Also, assorted other documents to just add color to the request.
Sure. Members of the board, any questions? Scott.
Yeah, hi, thanks for joining us tonight. I guess if you could give us just some context then, a little bit of an overview of the work that's being done at the facility, what's changed in the last couple of years that has bring you before us tonight with the increase in storage.
I'll take that one. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Aspen Aerogels, and I've been with the company since 1999. So we've grown up in Northborough. Our current headquarters has just moved this year to Marlborough, and so the facility is now a research and development center. And we've had 25 people thereabouts, scientists and engineers working in the facility, and they, as part of their work, chemists, material scientists, engineers, draw on chemical stores and do experiments to develop new products and processes. And so what we're doing is we're expanding a lot. We're going into automotive safety, and our business is expanding rapidly. Right now, we've basically doubled our employee roster here in the past year. And so we're expanding, and our R&D facility is now going to have up to about 60 people that are all scientists, engineers, and with a few administrators. And so really the load on the chemical stores and the amount of work is generating, we need more storage in order to complete the daily tests that we do. And we've expanded into battery materials as well as the automotive safety side. So we're developing new products, and we need to expand our license so that we're not so squeezed with a cap that makes us have to operate to the license limit basically on a daily basis.
Excellent. If I can kind of follow up a couple more. So then the materials themselves, some of the public might not have know exactly what some of the materials are. Can you provide a brief description of how they're used? Sure.
We make a product that's based on a technology called aerogel technology, and it is basically a nanoporous solid, meaning it is a solid which is composed primarily of air. And the the air pores within the material are on the size of 1/1000th of 1 meter or so, a few billionths of a meter. Our product technology is fairly unique. We reinforce these materials with fiber so that they can be flexible, and therefore they can be cut and applied and sewed and adhered to things. And the primary market in the early years was industrial energy efficiency. And so we make very high temperature insulation as well as very low temperature insulation, which has really served as our main marketplace for these many years. We have a revenue base of about $120 million right now, but that is now picking up significantly. That's per year. It's now picking up significantly as we're going into the automotive and battery safety area, where electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, for instance, have some safety issues on occasion. And so we put materials in between cells that will prevent something called thermal runaway, which will allow these vehicles to catch on fire, propagating throughout the entire battery module system. So we're finding a lot of excitement out there from OEMs like GM and Toyota, and VW and many other OEMs. And so we're working hard to develop products that are going to fit into their vehicles.
That's excellent. Thank you for that context. I think in a subsequent round, I might have some questions for staff, but that's great for the applicant. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned, I'm sorry, I forget who said this, but someone mentioned earlier the issue of having to operate at the maximum capacity of the existing storage currently. You're requesting an increase. Could I ask what you anticipate the actual capacity to be relative to that proposed maximum?
Right, I guess I'll take that. We're likely to operate at about 3/4 of that license limit to give us enough headroom so that we can store waste and be able to operate. You know, when I refer to operating near the limit, I'm talking about basically exchanging waste for clean solvent as we operate. And, you know, we can't take in sometimes enough material to do experiments before we ship the waste out, and it's caused us to stop doing experiments or to delay things. And so that's being too close to the limit, in my opinion. And so we would like to be, you know, let's say 25% away from that limit. That's what I anticipate.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Julianne, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did. Thank you. So my first question is, your expansion at the Northborough site, does that include more scientists and engineers? Or you mentioned that you have 60 people working there now, but you also have just opened something in Marlborough?
We currently have about 48 people working there now, and we anticipate going up to a little over 60, maybe 65 at the maximum.
At the Northborough plant?
At the 30 Forbes Road Building B site, yes.
Okay.
That's just R&D.
Great. And so in the application, it said that you get deliveries or somebody takes out the substances you don't need, like once or twice a week. Is that what, am I saying that correctly? And if so, like what are you talking about? Is this a huge vehicle that comes in, and is it a third party transportation? How does that work?
Rachel,
so I can take this. So I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Environmental Health and Safety. So what George is referring to and what he just mentioned with his response to Jason is that we have hazardous materials and we have hazardous waste. So we have materials that come in and we receive them, and then we are required legally to ship out our hazardous waste. So to answer your question, we have a third party who removes, so they're licensed and bonded, and that is their job to actually safely transport our hazardous waste so they're known as a TSDF, so they're a transporter of hazardous materials, or I'm sorry, hazardous waste that they properly transport, they treat, and they dispose of at an offsite location.
But how often does that happen? Twice a week, once a week? And what's the size of the vehicle?
Alex, Alex works for me, he's on the call. Alex, are you having a semi? What is the size of the truck that comes in and how often are you having pickups? I believe the pickups are once a week. And what's the size of the truck that comes in? Alex, can you speak up again, please?
I can answer that, I guess.
Sorry, his volume's cutting in and out.
We basically use box trucks, or we don't use it, but Clean Harbors or whoever is our way is using box trucks. I think these are what, 20 to 25 feet long.
Yeah.
Probably. So not a semi, not the largest vehicle by any means. It's a delivery truck size.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kristen.
Hi, so I guess this is a question for Rachel. So you said there's hazardous materials and hazardous waste, right? So to do the work that they're doing there, can you just give me a little, this is all really new to me. Can you just give me a little rundown of how it works?
Sure. So because it's a lab, it falls under OSHA's chemical hygiene plan, which requires very careful, very careful sort of calculations of how much material comes in and how much goes out the door, because we have to be in compliance with our license and our permits. So we will receive materials in support of the battery operation and or the other operation, the aerogel operation. So different labs, because there's a couple different labs, will use different materials. And so that is very carefully recorded in terms of the volumes that are used. Whatever is not used is kept in storage. So they will go in and they will take out the materials that they need on a daily basis. Everything else stays in storage. They will use whatever they need, and whatever is waste then goes into a storage area for waste. And then once a week it's shipped out as waste. So again, they're only taking out what they need. Everything else is stored. Everything that's waste is then put in the waste room, and that's shipped out as waste once a week. And that's to run their various experiments, whether it's in support of the batteries lab or in support of the aerogels lab.
I think it might be useful for me to just add a little bit about what type of waste that we generate.
Sure.
Our primary waste stream is ethanol based. So this is the same ethanol that's released in baking of bread or the stuff that you might drink if you do partake of alcohol. And we also have mineral spirits, which is a little bit more like heavy kerosene. And that's really the bulk of the waste that we generate. We don't work with biologicals or radioactives or things that at least I would find terrifying. We utilize the ethanol as a solvent that gives us these air-filled pores after we've done our processing. We utilize CO2 as a carbon dioxide as a process solvent under pressure, and that is not able to be shipped out because it basically is a gas. But that's our other waste component as well.
Okay, so you have the two technologies. You have the aerogel that you sort of described to us, which is still very mysterious in my brain. But I do have an electric car, so the battery thing I get, and I think it's great. So I hope you're also working with Ford. But and battery safety is really a big deal. I mean, even just getting on an airplane, you have to take your little charger out of your suitcase and put it in your bag because it might start a fire, which always makes me think, well, what if it started a fire in the cabin? Isn't that bad too? And anyway, I won't ramble on too long, but so it sounds like it's a really great stuff that you're working on. But you have to understand that we are also representing the residents in this neighborhood. And we haven't had this information for a ton of time. So my biggest question is probably like, have you ever had a spill or a problem where, because like what you were describing to me, Rachel, was very like, this is how it works and this is how it's always going to work. But obviously sometimes things go wrong. So has anything gone wrong at this facility? And if so, like, what level of mess was it?
Sure. So I'll speak to, I've been on board for about 2 years, and we have not had any spills, certainly that I'm aware of. But let me speak to, what we have in place, right? So because of our hazardous waste, we have a hazardous waste management and control plan. We have a hazardous waste contingency plan, and baked within those, right, are what we do in the event of, we have an emergency preparedness and response plan. So, those include things like all of our plans and programs are sent to not only the fire department, but the police department, the occupational clinics that we use. So we have relationships, and all of those programs in terms of emergency response are sent to anyone who would come on site in the event of. Because we're not required to have something, under the guise of stormwater, we're not required to have that sort of plan, and so we do training for, any of our, if you think of it, environmental liabilities, we do training on that annually. So I can't think of, in recent times, any spill that we've had. George can, he can answer anything that's happened historically, but since I've been there, we have not had any escape in that capacity. From an injury perspective, we've not had any serious, knocking on wood right here, or faux wood, we've not had any serious injuries since I've been there at that facility or that location. And again, we have very highly regimented, programs that encompass not only our laboratory safety, but all, OSHA, and if you will think of it, EPA programs up there for this reason. And everything is really managed with really good rigor and control at that site, because we're aware and we're cognizant of the neighborhood in which we're in, and whether it was there or any location, right? We want to do all of the right things for our employees, our communities, our neighborhoods, everything. So, but I can't think of anything, George, unless you know of anything that's happened.
No, we have not had any significant spills or loss of containment from the facility. We have to report anything over 5 gallons by law. That would be a spill, but we have not had anything like that. I'm sure we've had a few very minor spills, but we have spill kits, and we basically take care of these things immediately, because we're working with these materials. We don't want them to be out of our control either, and so we clean them up right away if there's ever any incidents.
And I'll add, we also have, contracts with our so the hazardous waste vendor that we use to take off our hazardous waste, we also have a contract with them in the event of, they are a spill responder, they are emergency responder, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though we're not operational 7 days a week up there. But the event of an escape, we call them, and they will, run contingency for us in the event of any escape.
Okay. How far away are they?
They're located, I'm trying to think of where their closest one is. I think it's in, I can find out. I want to say it's in Marlborough or it's in Worcester, but we use them in East Providence, and they have all sorts of satellite areas everywhere.
So the largest container that we have, which is probably your biggest risk, is a 55-gallon drum, and we only have those inside of our H2 dispensing room and storage area, which has a berm on it, and that the volume of containment is much greater. So we've got a very nice design to prevent any type of a loss of containment, is what I would say.
And it's inside the building, so if it goes, it's going to go inside the building.
Okay. And I was just reading the numbers here. It says type in maximum storage quantities per the license application. Flammable liquids, 880 gallons. Combustible liquids, 380 gallons. Flammable gases, 390 cubic feet. So that's what you're applying for, not what you already have?
That should be what we already have. As part of that application package was a copy of the current license. But there is an additional, the actual application has the quantities listed.
Okay, so I'm reading the old things. So the new things are, what are the new? There's just a lot to go through. And so the new numbers are more like
So if I may, so on the application, right, so flammable liquids will be 2,000 gallons. Combustible liquids will be 500 gallons. flammable gases will be 2,000 cubic feet, and flammable solids will be 11 pounds.
Okay.
And just wanted to add to this as well that the reason why the license is needed in terms of in the context of these amounts is because in the Mass General Laws, Chapter 148, which is the fire prevention laws, as well as in our fire code for the state 527 CMR, any address, any property that stores more than 793 gallons indoors of flammable liquids is required to hold a license for storage. And the license is held in this case by the owner of the property. And so Brianne is on the call with us. So she's with CBRE. So she is the owner's representative for the property. So, and the way this works is once the license is in place, as has been for a number of years, Aspen as the tenant then applies to the Northborough Fire Department for annually, by the way, for a storage permit. So the license is sort of the umbrella that covers the property, and it's actually a land license by definition. And then as the tenant, Aspen, once that license is in place, they can go to Northborough Fire, which they do annually, and they have to hold as a tenant a storage permit.
Okay, and just one more question. Does the fire department inspect every year or at some point? Do people get to see all these good storage facilities? Chief?
Yeah, Chief.
Yeah, we inspect as needed. So if we have concerns over they're bringing a new product in, or if we have as Rachel said, we get copies of all of their plans. So I review the plans. My hazmat expert reviews the plans. If we have a question about it, we'll go out, we'll inspect, we'll make sure the berms are intact. We make sure that the explosion doors, if they're there, are intact. We do all that. So, yeah,
So if we approve this, you would you go inspect after?
We've already been out. We're in the process already of making sure before we would even entertain the idea of permitting additional stuff. We've already been out there looking.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Julianne, you got a question?
So this is probably for Rachel. How often does OSHA pop in, or DEP?
They have not been at that site since I've been there. So they haven't been up there for the last 2 years. However, we have regular filings with both those agencies. I will say not with, well, we do have something going into EPA July 1st. It's a federal report that all of our locations submit, or it's a memo to file. So it's more so we have stuff going into DEP and OSHA. So we have regular filings. OSHA it depends on your risk and liability at the site, right? If you're on their radar or not. Fortunately, because we haven't had anything go on at the facility, they don't have an impetus. There's not an impetus to come in. And one of the things that OSHA would come in your facility for is, do you have a lot of injuries? We don't have a lot of injuries. And we do obviously all of our filings on time. We haven't had any major incidences. And so we keep up with all the things we need to keep up with. And we have good relationships with the state and local regulations and requirements. So that helps to keep us in management. But I have not had OSHA or EPA in that facility. I think DEP was in there a couple of years before, maybe a year before I started.
Yep, they came out for it was basically a surprise inspection.
Yeah.
And we did remarkably well. We got kind of the gold star of the day. They had no findings, and so our programs are well organized and solid.
What are the hours of the facility? Or is it 7 days a week, or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? What are the hours?
Primary operating times would be between probably 6 in the morning and 6 at night during the week, and rarely would you have anybody on the weekends. We don't do active work on the weekends unless there's more than one person available for safety reasons, and so it's fairly rare that anything that has to do with chemistry or processing is going on. There might be people in doing some paperwork or doing some measurements with instruments. So we don't really have a, there is no buildings locked and people can't get in policy. It is locked, of course, and only employees can get in, but there is no formal working hours, but I think the primary would be 6 to 6, 5 days a week.
Okay. George, you started to describe that one of your major projects now is to improve lithium batteries that are used in cars and whatnot. So you mentioned that one of the problems with them is fire, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this makes my imagination say these experiments must be a little hazardous. Could you describe that a little bit and
sure
questions you take?
As a scientist and a former professor, I will agree with you that chemistry and materials, a lot of these things can be very dangerous, and so that's why people go to school for so long, and they train and do apprenticeships in order to understand how these things work. The reason that the current generation of lithium-ion batteries is particularly dangerous is that they use flammable liquids or combustible liquids inside of the battery packs themselves. And so the potential to catch on fire is there. Now, remember, you're charging up a vehicle. These things can discharge all at once if there's a short, so all of the energy that's stored in the battery can basically come out in a very short period of time, which can cause those liquids to catch on fire or to overheat more precisely, which then can cause them to do a runaway and then catch on fire. The current generation of batteries in the United States and pretty much worldwide is a little too focused on driving range. So, I want to have 500 miles or 600 miles of driving range. That forces the chemists and the material scientists and the engineers to design systems that are pretty much on the edge of any type of safe operation. These materials are basically unstable. They are being charged at voltages which are very high. The materials within there are the organic solvents that can burn. So there is some inherent danger to them. The type of work that we're trying to do at Aspen on the battery side is to deliver a little bit more energy range, but not in the areas that are the unstable compounds that I was talking about. So we're looking at a couple of things. One of them is called lithium iron phosphate, which is at a much safer battery type system. And the other one is trying to replace graphite in the anode of the batteries. That does put some silicon metal in there to give it a little bit more energy, but there's no reason for these things to be used at very high voltages in the future, is what I'm looking at. But our primary focus on battery safety is really in these thermal insulation materials, which are to prevent the cataclysmic kind of domino effect of what happens when a battery cell goes bad. And when that goes bad, it can eat the entire car with fire. And I don't know if any of you had seen the news a few months ago where an entire ship going across the ocean caught on fire with like 4,000 cars in it, and they all went down to the bottom of the, because they couldn't put out the fires, they had to abandon the ship. So these are inherently dangerous materials, but we're not working on systems that are like that. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on battery safety and to design better materials, less expensive, more efficient, and hopefully the marketplace will not demand the 600-mile battery pack. Maybe people can deal with 300 miles or something. I know I don't, I don't have to drive 600 miles very often. So between a fill up at the gas station.
That was a really clear explanation. Thank you. So that leads me to ask the question, when you change projects, say you're going to work on something entirely different, does the town get apprised of that?
No. I think if we do anything significant, Rachel, you can probably add to this. As the chief said, if we bring in something new, if we're bringing in something that's not within our permits, then we do inform the town. If we're talking about small experiments at the laboratory bench in our laboratory ventilation hoods, We change chemistries. We do discovery experiments and research in particular, where you look at questions at a fundamental level. You're trying to answer, you have ideas and you're trying to answer whether they are feasible or not by designing experiments and carrying them out. If we were to inform the town on every experiment that we did, I'm pretty sure there would be a bit of a logjam on the bureaucracy side. For instance, we probably do hundreds of experiments a week that may have some amount of uniqueness to them. But we as a business, I think we're focused on areas of chemistry and not just anything goes. As I mentioned, we tend to work with ethanol or with these kerosene-like solvents when we're doing things. And that means that we're somewhat limited in our universe. So we do small differences in our experiments. A lot of them are very disciplined and statistically oriented to develop new products, to optimize things, to change process conditions slightly. We tend not to go way outside the pale. But as in a research and development laboratory, it is certainly not uncommon for people to do things that are hazardous. And that's, again, where you get all the training and why we have great colleagues in our environmental safety and health operation who they evaluate any changes that we make. They basically give us permits. They help keep us safe, and together everybody owns safety in our building. I mean, it's as I like to say to my colleagues, the most important thing is make sure that your colleagues get to go home at the end of the day to see their families, right? And so safety is a very serious thing. And the last thing you want is for people to get hurt in our operation, or our neighbors to be hurt, or for an incident to happen in the town. I mean, you provide us a place to do our business, and I think it is up to us to be highly responsible and safe and be compliant with all the laws.
Yeah, and that was great, George. And I'll add to that with what he was talking about. Anytime we purchase equipment, whether it's expense or capital, anytime we decommission equipment, anytime we move equipment, and that's going on right now, literally we already have equipment and we're just moving it from point A to point B. We require that the organization does something called a management of change. So they have to go through and actually detail, are we having contractors do the work? Are we having our facilities or maintenance group do the work? And also included in there not only is the safety piece, but also the environmental piece. Because what he was talking about, do I go to the fire department or not? What I'm looking through as we are buying equipment, moving equipment, are we adding or removing any environmental risk or liability to our portfolio? So that's where I will look at and ask questions about, okay, we're buying a new piece of equipment. Are we generating new waste? Are we discharging anything to the environment? Are we putting any new air emissions into the environment? Because that might change our existing permits, or do we need amendments or updates to things? So that's how the process flows. And we do this at all of our locations because it gives us, it's the gateway for us deciding what is our risk, what is our liability, not only to the community, but to the employees, and what do we need to do about that? Do we need, again, to amend permits? Do we need different training? Do we need new policies, new procedures? But that is what we do, like I said, in the event that we buy equipment, whether it's capital or expense, or we move equipment, we take equipment down, because that's our our gate to what we're going to do and how we're going to assess.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, just a follow-up. So in terms of containers, and going to 2,000 gallons for liquids, 2,000 cubic feet for gases. You said the largest container on the liquids, like a 55-gallon drum. What are the cylinder sizes like for the gases?
Geez, I don't know how much. I guess it depends on the gas. They're basically a 5-foot cylinder, maybe 9 inches, 10 inches in diameter. So they're basically
those standard cylinders that we see.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
T-size cylinders would be the largest cylinder that we would have. Yeah.
And those are typically between 250 cubic feet to 300 cubic feet of stored gas.
Excellent. Thank you. And then maybe this might be a question for Rachel or Chief Parenti. So then kind of put the increase in perspective for us. Are there different procedures and plans and reporting and inspection requirements at threshold levels? So if you got to 10,000 gallons, 20,000 gallons? What are like the ranges, and are we still on kind of like the smallest range of reporting and inspection?
I can certainly answer part of that. So Massachusetts right now is the only state that, in addition to the storage permit that Aspen holds as a tenant, they're also required, and they hold a processing permit. So this is in section 60.8 of our fire code. It's been in effect for, wow, probably almost 12 years now. And so annually, Aspen renews their process permit as well as their storage permit. And to your question about scale and size, so the categories of the permit for processing are related to the size of the equipment and the vessel size. So processes that are running, anything up to 60 gallons in size can be regulated by what we call a Category 2 processing permit. But the minute that you cross over and you go to 61 gallons, in that range up to 300 gallons, that's covered by Category 3. Also, if you're a high hazard use per the building code, which is a whole nother topic, you automatically kick in Category 3, which is the next tier up in requirements of reporting and process safety. So there's this extra layer that Massachusetts has added in for the processing permit.
And so in this increase, have we crossed those categories, or are we still within the same category?
Aspen is still within Category 2.
Okay, thank you.
For processing size.
A couple of process questions. First one probably is for Chief Parenti. How does this license application compare to existing licenses and related permits for other businesses in town? Is this, do we have others of this size? Is this much larger or in the same range?
We have some that are much larger and some that are much smaller. We have another R&D facility in town that has a whole lot, a much broader range of chemicals that they keep on site, which makes our work, again, trying to make sure that we can permit them every year. So we do have some that are bigger and some that are smaller, but we're very lucky in that all of our community partners keep us very well apprised and send us spreadsheets. So if you look at the application, it says 2,000 gallons of, but we know specifically how much of each specific product and where it's kept. And that's important to understand as well. It's not a 2,000 gallon tank that's sitting in the middle of their different areas. And that's actually what John, I'm sure, could expand on. You can have so much per plate or I'm going to lose the word, John. Name of it.
Yeah, per control area.
Thank you, per control area. I was just reading it today. So that's all involved in that as well.
Thanks, Chief. The other process question, I did drive around the building to just familiarize myself with it, and I saw that there are other tenants in the same building. I'm just curious if, as part of the public hearing process or as part of the license application, whether the other tenants in the same building are notified of this application. I don't know who's best to answer that.
I believe best to answer that is Di, but I do believe that there is, yes. And do you know for sure? I'd have to look at the email and see how she sent it out, but no.
Is the question who gets notified about
Yes.
it?
The question is whether other tenants in the same building have been notified.
Yes, they're notified.
Yeah, because they're butters.
Direct abutters and anybody across from the facility is notified by law.
Great. That's what I assumed, but wanted to verify. Thank you. Any other questions from the board for either the applicant or for staff before we open it up to public? Julianne.
Yeah, so if we're on process questions, would it be prudent to have groundwater weigh in on this? Our groundwater committee.
John.
If I may, through the chair, just so groundwater did review a similar process in 2019, and the town engineer and the building inspector did make the determination, and the groundwater committee made the determination that it was significantly under the original permitting limit. The original permitting limit, special permit limit, was 17,000. So in 2019, groundwater did review this. They were looking at, I think at the time, 1,500 gallons. And at that time, groundwater felt that it was, since it was well within the special permit limit, that they did not take any action. And that's a matter of record.
Thanks, John.
And what about Board of Health?
The Board of Health doesn't have any role, any licensing role.
I understand they don't have a licensing role, but do they ever comment on something like this? I remember another facility in town with hazardous waste, and it went before the Board of Health.
I don't know what the specific issue was or whether or not they had a licensing role, but no, they generally do not.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Jason.
Not very good at positioning my hand within view of the camera.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to the permitting under groundwater, I just guess I want to clarify that. Are we saying that there is a special permit already in effect at higher capacities than what is being proposed here?
That's my understanding from the building inspector and the town engineer. Yes.
Okay. And so that special permit was reviewed and approved some time ago with the expectation of having higher volumes of materials. And now this increase is still within the limits of that original special permit
Yes.
approval? Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions before we open up to the public? I don't see any hands. Okay, members of the public, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to add at this time, please raise your virtual hand. I see one from Carrie Martinick. I will press the allow to talk button and you'll be on audio. Carrie, go ahead. Identify yourself, please.
Hello, Carrie Martinick, 16 Hemlock Drive. I assume you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. I have several questions and I don't expect answers necessarily this evening, but I was hoping the board could keep them in mind and perhaps follow up if there's an opportunity. Having not seen the full materials, some of these may be answered inherently, so that's fine. I at least wanted to put them out there though. Question was, so if they were, at the time they had the earlier permits, when they had a reduced level, were they decommissioned? And if so, is this an expansion of use? If this is an expansion of use, do they need a special permit or an amendment to the original permit? What are the chemicals and were they already approved in the 2002 special permit? Since we're 20 years later, do these chemicals need further review? Often with research and new findings, acceptable chemicals and levels change. Are they still all within the same acceptable limits? Has groundwater deemed they're not detrimental to the water supply? Do they need to come back? I think this question was already asked about coming back to groundwater. I would say encourage the board to review the groundwater minutes from February 2019. Their recommendation was based on the application at the time, and the special permit wasn't necessary because the expansion of ethanol was still within the limits. There was also a question about going back to the ZBA. Again, this was the application at the time. With it being a new application in 2022, I think it's important to take a look at that and review. It has a new storage, been reviewed and approved as acceptable. Is there a contingency plan for leaks? What kind of annual inspections will occur and how will the board of selectmen condition them if they're outside of the special permit process? And this very well may be something you can do within this licensing process. I'm not as familiar with it. Is there a new site plan? Does it need to be reviewed? And I heard the question about abutters being notified. I heard it was tenants in the building, but I'm wondering what was the radius of the notification for abutters? And has that list of abutters been made available in the packet? And I think that was it. Those are my questions. Again, I don't expect answers this evening. I can email them as well. I know I had quite a few, but those are the things when I first saw this on the agenda that I thought I'd bring up. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Does anyone want to address any of the questions or comments before I bring the next person in? Okay. Next up is Lisa Maselli. Okay, Lisa, you're in.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the call. I'm just, again, as the resident in at large, would like to hope that you don't make a decision tonight, but do a little bit more research, since this certainly looks to be quite extensive, and it does deal with some groundwater issues, and there's a lot to be seen here, and I think there's a lot more questions that need to be answered, and I'm sure you'll do a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, and next I have Bill Pierce. I'll bring you in, Bill. Bill, you should be in now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for opening this up. I just have one quick comment or question. I don't know if this was the case when the original permit was granted, but the area around that facility is part of SA Farm, which is a Chapter 61 agricultural and horticultural deemed by the state. So I just want to make sure if any permit changes need to be made from when that was first instituted till now, that those, I know the whole thing with SA Farm and everything else. I live at 367 Whitney Street, but it is still technically a Chapter 61 land, and so we sort of have to treat it as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Would anyone like to address any of those comments or questions before we open it back up to the board? Okay, members of the board or staff, does anybody have anything they'd like to add at this time? Julianne.
Well, I just want to say that for people who follow our agenda, there was an error when the agenda came out on Thursday. And I don't believe that was corrected until midday on Friday. And therefore, I think that in all fairness, we should talk about extending this public hearing.
A question for the applicant. Are there any significantly adverse situation if we continue the hearing until our next meeting in the middle of July?
We're operating under the current license and permits, and we will continue to do so as long as we have to. So,
okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments on that? Again, that was a typographical issue at our end that if we do continue the hearing, that shouldn't mean anything adverse relative to any final decision that we'll make on the application. But we want to make sure we give the public opportune time to chime in and ask any questions that they feel appropriate. Jason, did I see your hand go
up? Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just briefly, I guess on this particular point of at least some uncertainty with respect to some of the other town process and approvals and permits and everything. I think people probably would be more comfortable if more of that information was available and clarified, so that there isn't any question. In my mind, I'm listening to this information tonight and feeling pretty good about what I'm hearing. But I think there are some other process questions that people are going to want answers to.
Yeah, I agree. The board is just seeing this information. We saw this all for the first time on Friday and saw about the agenda item first Thursday, thinking it was a decrease, and then we learned afterwards that it was an increase. These things happen. We all have to educate ourselves about the technical and chemistry specifics of what's going on here. And if other boards and committees want to chime in, I agree. It does not sound like there's anything mandating groundwater, formally recommend or don't recommend anything here. But if they want to review this between now and our next meeting, that would be, I imagine, up to the chair of groundwater. They could do so. And if any other boards and committees wanted to chime in, that's fine. I would just want to make sure that we receive any input from anybody else by the time our next meeting begins. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add at this time? In which case, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move
Yes.
the board vote to continue the public hearing for the application by G&I 9 Forbes Whitney LLC to amend the existing above-ground flammables and combustibles storage license for premises located at 30 Forbes Road to the July 18th, 2022 meeting of the Board of Selectmen at 7 p.m. so that the board may receive and review additional information regarding the particular use of the property in connection with the materials that will be stored at the property.
Is there a second? Okay, motion made by Julianne, seconded by Jason. Any other discussion? Okay, Julianne, how do you, Julianne, did you have a question?
I do have one more question. Can maybe a staff person can advise this on if this is a situation where a peer review would be helpful?
I don't think we can immediately
I don't
respond
think
to
it,
that.
I mean, I don't think it rises to that level. This is pretty straightforward, but
It's not unusual for us to get applications to update licenses or permits. I don't, I mean, but I really don't believe that this rises.
Given that we're staying within the same processing category, this increase is not as significant as would warrant additional reviews. That would be my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I asked the question about similar licenses, and upon learning that, what I suspected, that we have some businesses in town with much greater quantities of some of these things. Peer review process probably isn't required. Okay, if there are no other questions from the board, Julianne, how do you vote? This is again on continuing the public hearing. You vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The public hearing is continued to our meeting on July 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, we'll let our guests exit out. Thank you. We did get started a couple of minutes late, and neglected to mention that so that we could begin the public hearing as close to on time as possible. We pushed off the public comment that was at the beginning, typically now at the beginning of our agenda. So we'll do that now. And I will say this is our first meeting since we decided at our last meeting to have more of a context-aware version of public comments. So the public comments that are on the agenda are for items not on our agenda. So if you have any suggestions for a future agenda topic or something we've discussed recently but are not discussing this evening, this would be the time for that. And what we will do is during any other agenda item, if a member of the public wishes to speak up, just raise your hand while we're on that item. And I'll recognize you before the end of that topic, and certainly before there is any vote on that topic. It's not going to be in a formal public hearing method where I'm going to ask for public input on every item. Just members of the public, just raise your hand when you want. But we have one hand up for items not on our agenda right now. Lisa, I'll bring you in.
Thank
Lisa,
you.
welcome back.
Thank you very much. Lisa Maselli, 13 Maple Street. At the last BOS meeting, I did ask 3 questions during public comments, and I was told they'd be answered by tonight. I didn't receive any emails in relationship to any of them. I'm just going to read them quickly again so that they're on the minutes. The first one was certain RFQs are under the purview of the selectmen. Do they view, edit, and approve these RFQs before they get posted? 2, do the selectmen see monthly reports such as progress or complaint and resolution from the department heads, all of the department heads? And 3, I would like to make a request and revisit and rescinding of the department reporting policies set up in July 18th, 2016, whereby the administrator evaluates the fire and police chief. They are all equal on the org chart, and this policy goes against the charter. So I would like that addressed at some point. Thank you so much.
I apologize. I'm the one who committed to getting you answers to those, and I have some of that information, but not all of it. So I apologize for that, and I do promise we'll get back to you very soon on those answers. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you much.
Are there any other items of comment for things that are not on our agenda? If not, we will continue to reports. Scott.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, a quick question for you, Mitch.
Sure.
I know our liaison assignments that help us, know what to report on. We know individually what we have, but we don't have the document that lets us know who else is covering each. So if I could put that on your to-do list, just
you are absolutely correct. Everyone knows what you're responsible for, but the consolidated version did not get sent over to Di and the rest of the board.
Yeah, and that's great. So then if I see something really cool at Cultural Council, I know who to talk to them. Great. Thanks for that.
I'll take care of that this week. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to thank Chief Liber for the earlier report we received today. I guess, there's some incident categories that are very critical, sensitive. So just thanks to your officers and the work they do, Chief. We appreciate all the work that's done and those sobering items that are in the report, someone's.
Thank you.
In terms of liaison assignments, the Board of Health had a meeting on the 14th. They covered materials like pool inspections, lifeguard requirements for those pools. We've seen the impact statement from Northcourt associated with that. Vaccine rates, especially with the June 9th vaccination, were quite high for the area. And at the time of the meeting, they were preparing for under 5-year vaccines. Since then, that approval has come through, and as part of that work, they completed a survey of pediatricians in the area, knowing what their plans are for vaccination to help form what we might do as a town. And I think you saw an infographic published earlier today on some of the things about the pediatric vaccine. Reminder that free antigen tests are available at the health department, the library, and the senior center. If they're temporarily out, just means they're restocking. But in looking at, if I jump to the next day where the Greater Boroughs Partnership met, a lot of those remaining funds for fiscal year 22 that are expiring are going towards medical supplies, and they're stockpiling those. Any remaining grant money that can be rolled over into 23 is happening there. Staffing for health department is in great shape with Isabella, our epidemiologist, increased to full time, 2 new interns, and it was one of the interns, Ariella, I think, that did the surveying on the pediatricians in the area and their vaccine plans. So welcome to those folks. At the time of the meeting, we're also interviewing for health inspector. That hire has been made, met Mike last week. So welcome aboard Mike Seeger as our new health inspector. Conservation Commission covering a lot of applications for septic systems, tree removals, and other work. Those are approved or continued as they go through their work. One kind of specific item came up with respect to Edmund Hill, and I believe the individual camping there has been issued a citation and referred to services. So as far as I know, that scenario has been addressed appropriately by town staff and services. Then finally, thanks to everybody who came out and enjoyed the great weather on the 22nd for the Be Well Northborough kickoff. Judging by the line of families in front of each of the events and inflatables, I think everybody had a great time. It was great to have a little bit of music in the background and representation across the board. Great kickoff to the center. And I saw a lot of smiling faces. So thanks to everybody that came out for that. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Kristen, you have anything to report on?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first thing on my report is a question for DPW Scott. Is he there behind his black square? Hi, Scott. So I'm sorry if I missed your email about this, but I thought the safety zone flashing lights went off in the summer. Am I wrong about that?
The motion that was made by the Board of Selectmen and approved included the time of the daily operations for weekdays. It did not include any termination during non-school seasons, whether it be summer, February, April vacation.
Yeah.
So that was not part of the motion. The meeting included a reevaluation in the coming months to see how it operated, whether the timing was warranted, the extended afternoon into early evening hours. I haven't seen that posted on the agenda for discussion. So as of now, the lights are operating in accordance with the actions taken by the board.
Okay, thanks. I remember you saying that you could turn them off with like it's digital. So but we should have made it more specific as far as dates go, definitely. So maybe we need to revisit that, but yeah, so sorry everyone driving down Bartlett Street with flashing lights in the summertime. Sorry about that. So, okay. And then I wanted to say thanks to everyone who attended virtually or in person our ARPA meeting on, when was that? A Thursday, a couple weeks ago. It was, we got a lot of really good suggestions, and I look forward to discussing all the options we have. I would like to say at the end of this lovely June, happy Pride Month. And I hope the Cultural Council event that happened on what was the date of that? The 18th. I had to miss that because I was working, but I hope that was a lovely event, and I hope we hear about that from either Julianne or Mitch or someone else who was there. And my quote for tonight is live for each second without hesitation. That's by Elton John. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Julianne, do you have any reports?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I will report on the Culture Fest. It was a big success, great turnout. Everybody seemed to enjoy the music, the art, the food. I do have to say this group worked so hard to put it all together and make the Common look festive, even challenged by some pretty gusty winds at one point, but they pulled it off, and I think everybody had a great time. So everyone's now looking forward to their next event. And unfortunately, I was unable to attend the Be Well or the music event over the weekend, but I understand that congratulations are in order there for a successful events. I should report on White Cliffs, who met just this past week, and we have hired Kirk and Company to help us find a partner for the project. I think it was pretty much a unanimous decision. And our next meeting will be on July 20th, mostly for housekeeping items. And then I just have one request. And it sort of came up with all these events and some, now that we're using the town common again, is how would it work to get public parking signs at our public parking lots in town? We have precious little parking as it is, and people don't know where it is. So if we could get signs on those couple of lots, that would be helpful.
John, did you have any, or I'm sorry, Scott.
Through the chair, Julianne, are you referring to Trailblazer signs from the event location, directing people to the parking, or just a sign at Assabet that says parking?
A sign at Assabet, a sign on Blake Street, a sign, the one on Pierce Street, anywhere where we have public parking. It's not well posted.
Okay.
Thanks.
I understand. I'll take a look and come up with some recommendations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, that ends my report.
Thank you, Julianne. Jason?
I also attended the Cultural Council event on the town common, and I agree with Julianne. It was a success despite some windy and gusty conditions out there. So I appreciate all the people who turned out to enjoy it, and all the vendors who had their booths set up and were conducting the activities. And I believe that will conclude my report.
Thank you, Jason. I've got a couple of things. As always, I want to thank everyone who emails information to us between our meetings. We received quite a number of emails with input for ARPA. We received a request to start a traffic and safety committee. We, as was mentioned before, an email about lifeguards. I got an email about residential land use issues and a few other things. I want to congratulate a business owner in town that is familiar with many of us here. Dawn Rand had her 50th dance recital from her dance studio. My daughters are students there, and we attended that. We call her Dawn Rand, former member of the board. They refer to as Miss Dawn, and congratulations to her on that amazing achievement. I attended the Culture Fest at the Town Common, and it was fantastic, as have been echoed here. One of the things I was looking forward to was one last look at the doors that the Cultural Council had put up earlier on at Ellsworth McAfee Park, and they did an auction at the end to raise money a little bit for both the Cultural Council and for the artists that participated in those. And you may notice behind my shoulder over here, I was the lucky winning bidder of the North Road door, bidding against at least one other person. It was very fierce right until the end, and I'm happy to have taken it home, and I've got to find a good permanent home for it, which may not be in my house. You may see it at the library or somewhere else in the future. I want to make note that some of the emails that we got earlier, about a month ago, were about concerns with the town election being held at Melican, coinciding with while school was in session. The school committee took that onto themselves, and for the next school year have scheduled school vacation days, or really professional development days, on all anticipated town elections, including the primary at the beginning of September. And they had already accounted for the November statewide election. And they also added in our annual town election next May. So for the coming year, that issue is resolved, but I imagine we'll be speaking with them sometime in coming months to see if there's any long-term way to deal with that. And I do want to make note that the current state law that I referred to at the beginning of the meeting, allowing us to meet remotely, the current law expires before our next meeting, goes until July 15th. The Senate has put into their budget proposal to extend that until I think it's the end of calendar 2023. The House has not yet done that, and they haven't finalized the budget at the state level. Of course, the budget is supposed to be done in the next 3 days, and we'll see whether that happens. Everyone is telling me, and John, I know you've heard the same thing, that the state wants to continue the remote meeting option. Hopefully they will do so by our next meeting and come up with some resolution to that issue. But there is a chance that if they don't, or if there's an overlap, that we may end up meeting in person on the 18th. The Be Well Northborough, as everyone said, was a fantastic event, and I heard a number of people say that they hope this is the first annual end of school celebration along those lines. Not to put any pressure on all of the town staff that put a lot of work into making that happen, but it was a lot of fun for the adults, and it was obviously a lot of fun for the kids. And my last item is, as the town prepares for Apple Fest, the Rotary Club is starting to advertise for participation in the street fair that takes place on the Saturday of Apple Fest. I think it's the 17th. Hold on, let me make sure I get the date correct. Yes, Saturday, September 17th will be the street fair for Apple Fest. If your organization or your business would like to have a table at the Applefest Street Fair. Please email the Rotary Club of Northborough at gmail.com, or just search for the Rotary Club of Northborough online and you will find them. That ends my reports. John, did you have anything to offer at this time?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I do want to echo on the Be Well Northborough kickoff meeting, the tremendous amount of work that staff put in. We have estimates of upwards of 1,000 people making their way through during the course of the 4 hours of the event. And Jen Brunel from the library, our library director, Kristen Black, our health agent, and Allie Lane, our rec director, really were the ones that did the lion's share of the work. But of course, police, fire were there. We had staff from all departments, and I just have to say, it was one of the more most proud moments I've had as a town administrator being there, because we've done so much related to COVID that we've had to do that has been about preserving life and safety and necessary. And this was the first COVID related thing that we did that was about building community, getting people out of isolation, getting folks back to that sense of community and having fun at a large scale that covered all departments. And it was a huge success. And I'm just really proud of the staff, and just want to thank them publicly for all the hard work. We got tons of really positive feedback. So it was a fantastic event. And as we quickly said, boy, this would be great if we could do this every year. It's something we'll look at. It was an incredible amount of work, but again, it was so well received by the community. I think that's something we'll need to take a look at. The other thing I did want to mention, there was a request that you had made about the auditor. So our audit report is up on the webpage where it has been, but we have not had our new auditor in to present to the board. So we've been able to confirm that the auditor will be in at your July 18th meeting to do a brief presentation and answer any questions. Again, this is our new auditor from a firm that we have not used before, so it'd be interesting to see their fresh take on the finances of town. So, but that is confirmed for the 18th. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right. Next up, we have approval of end of year transfers in our agenda packet. There are a list of a few end of year transfers. John, do you want to give us a quick summary?
Sure. So, every year, it comes down to winter. I blame Scott Charpentier, our DPW director, if we run short, because really it depends on what happens, what kind of winter we experience. He chimes in here. So what we do in Northborough, our practice has been to cover any shortages that come up due to unforeseen circumstances. We want to cover those within the current fiscal year. So snow and ice is the only really operational budget line item that you can legally overexpend. And that's because obviously you can't predict what Mother Nature is going to throw at you. Oftentimes we see blizzards or storms, we'll get federal reimbursement or state reimbursement. But sometimes those reimbursements will trail upwards of a fiscal year later. So in your packet, you have a memo from Scott talking about bear with me 1 second, just the roundup. We keep you updated as the year goes by. So I know you're all aware that we had expended our full budget. Our full budget snow and ice is $437,000. And so we were over that by about a little more than 112,000. It's actually not bad. And it moves around and bounces around each year. What we do here is to be realistic. Once you increase your snow and ice budget, you can't then decrease it and be allowed to carry over if you exceed it. So that's state law. So what we do is we take a 5 or 6 year running average so that we're realistic. Believe it or not, there are years like last year where we come in under. And then we seem to get on a tear where, we have these terrible years where we have a lot of storms. And again, like I said, oftentimes if they're blizzards, significant storms, we do get reimbursement for those, but we have to cover them within the fiscal year. So our practice, it's not required, but our practice is always to deal with any overages within the current fiscal year. So the alternative would be, if you don't do that, that you would kick the can and essentially add that tax impact to fiscal 2023. So it skews your numbers and doesn't give a good representation of when you incurred the expenses. So snow and ice is the lion's share of the issue. But we had a couple other things that popped up this year, and I know I've kept you apprised of these as well. 101 Colburn Street was a structure fire. The owner did not, it was incapable or unwilling to remove that structure. In very rare instances, the town has the legal authority to do that. Obviously, we don't want to because it's an unbudgeted item. But 101 Colburn Street was a little over $71,000. We had to remove the structure and clean up the property. The town has since put a lien on that property, which means we will get our payment through one of two ways: when the property is sold, or if the property that expense moves onto the tax bill. And if the owner is, again, unwilling or unable to pay it, property would go into tax title. So the town is always made whole on these. The challenge is having to cover that unanticipated expense within a fiscal year. So it's an unbudgeted expense, but it's a public safety hazard. So we needed to take care of that. We also had a situation with our only custodian on the general government side. We have one custodian that's shared between police and town hall. Unfortunately, that individual was out on a long-term medical, and so we had to bring in cleaning services. Clearly, during COVID, it's critical that we maintain sanitation of the buildings. So we did have that to deal with as well. And then last but not least, we've had in my 20 years what is an extraordinary year of litigation pertaining to several planning board cases. Now, the board has been kept up to date on these. You've met in executive session to discuss them. Is the Gutierrez Company versus the Northborough Planning Board. There's Isometric Operations, Steris, DBA Steris versus the Northborough Planning Board. Able Construction Incorporated versus the Northborough Planning Board. And then we have some ongoing outstanding bills that are coming in the month of June pertaining to that. So our total town council bill is, budget is $90,000. As long as I've been here, it used to be 75 or 80,000. I increased that to 90,000 within the last fiscal year. But we are in need of a little over $92,000 transfer based on these this litigation cases in our legal fund. So that's extraordinary. Again, litigation that was not budgeted for or planned for, but needs to be addressed. So in total, if you look at the memo, there's two things. Transferring, I should back up. We always have in every fiscal year, Appropriations Committee Emergency Reserve Fund, and it's $175,000. And so usually that is enough to deal with these unforeseen circumstances. But unfortunately, this year we had, like I said, 113,000 snow and ice, and then about 71,000 in emergency structure removal at 101 Colburn Street. And so that essentially ate up the Appropriations Committee reserve. So before you tonight, what we're suggesting or recommending is that we transfer from our health insurance budget, which actually had a very good year in fiscal 2022. As you know, we've done an excellent job of managing our health insurance budget. And we always have a balance in there to deal with migration, people coming onto our health insurance. So the recommendation would be to transfer $115,000 from the health insurance budget to take care of the remaining costs for 101 Colburn Street, the town hall custodian coverage at $28,000, and then we need overall $77,000 transfer to take care of some of the litigation expenses that we've experienced. So again, these are pretty routine year-end transfers. I'd say the only thing, usually we're able to contain these within the emergency reserve account, but again, the planning board litigation is the item that really pushed us over this time. So this is a process, Appropriations Committee reserve. That's a simple vote by appropriations, but it's the additional transfer of $115,000 year end that requires the Board of Selectmen as well as the Appropriations Committee to approve that. And that resolves everything for the current fiscal year. And will have us wrap up the fiscal year. I don't have the numbers, obviously. We're not closed out yet. We have another month, this month, to wrap up. But I would anticipate we will finish out the fiscal year with a reasonable surplus in the black, as we always do. But in these specific line items, we just need to move these funds around to balance those out. So that's what's before you this evening.
Thanks, John. Any questions from the board? Julianne.
In the case of the legal fees, if we win the cases, just do those companies reimburse us?
No, that's highly unlikely. You can make a case for, recouping your legal fees, but that's a very rare situation. I've yet to see that happen ever. But we can, and if we can make that case. But it's not likely.
Okay.
Scott, did your hands go up? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. John, you had mentioned that coming into this budget year, you had increased the attorney's budget a bit. So I think you answered what was going to be my question. Is this is kind of a singular event? Do we need to adjust the budget? It seems like you've made some adjustment to anticipate a slightly higher fee, but we really don't. It doesn't sound like we need to do more than that. That this is kind of or at least for this year, is out of the ordinary.
Yeah, we're hoping that the bulk of this will resolve during this current during fiscal year. We have 90,000 budgeted for 2023. I guess you just never. You don't know in terms of litigation that's up to the cases that come up. But this is extraordinary in terms of historically what we've encountered. Typically, we don't have overages in our legal budget. I should say also it's more complicated than just looking at the legal budget. Depending on the nature of the matter, for instance, if we have a building project and it's legal expenses, we'll get charged that building project, especially if MSBA is going to reimburse for a portion of it. If it's a personnel matter, those expenses would get charged off to the personnel board account. In other words, in when we do like labor negotiations. So what we try to maintain in that legal budget is really just unanticipated expenses. And on a day-to-day basis, we use legal counsel proactively. We try to involve them in anything that might potentially lead to litigation so that we don't wind up in litigation. Once you do wind up in court, it gets very expensive very quickly. And you could see $25,000 bills in a month. And when litigation is active, like we are right now in the Gutierrez case and moving into the Steris case, you're taking depositions, counsel is actively litigating in court. The expenses move up very, very quickly on that. In the case of the Gutierrez, we've had to hire also expert witnesses in terms of groundwater. So those expenses, are in there as well. But hopefully these will resolve themselves, and this isn't a long-term trend. If it is, then we'll have to budget accordingly to make sure that the resources are available. But litigation specifically, legal advice and expertise is something we try to bring into meetings, as I said, proactively on the front end. If you're unable to resolve things once you get into litigation, it's always expensive, which is why it's to be avoided if possible. Sometimes it's not avoidable. So,
thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other questions from members of the board? John, are there notable portions in that legal expense relative to the issue with the sewer in Marlboro and WRA or with SA Farm?
No, well, in terms of, that was where I was saying, in terms of the litigation that we have with Marlboro, those expenses are paid for by the sewer enterprise fund, so they don't show up here. So we have litigation, we have a lot of just land use legal expenses in terms of consultation with counsel and so forth. There's a little bit of SA farm expense in there, not much. We don't really have that litigation has sort of been on hold. But it's mostly just a little bit of a lot of land use and a lot of little bits of, if we have a personnel matter or something that we want to bounce off council before we take action, we always, like I said, that the way to use town council is in advance of the problem. Once the problem's here and you're in court, there's not a whole lot you got to do. It's gonna run its course through. So
yeah. The only thing more expensive than using counsel before a problem is using counsel after the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. There are no other questions from the board. We do have a couple of hands raised from the audience. I will bring in the first person, Lisa Maselli. Hold on, I lost your button for a second. Here we go. Lisa, you should be able to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have two different groups I want to discuss. The 101 Colburn Street. There are a couple things after reading some of the packet that we had an RFP that took care of removing the debris and repairing the right side of the house for $37,258. Wasn't including hazardous waste or regulated materials because the company doing it would not be responsible for that. So who did remove the hazardous waste would be my first question. Second question.
We hired, well, to the chair, I'll answer that question. We hired a LSP, a licensed site professional, to oversee that process so that it was done correctly and thoroughly.
And the second question is, why the disparity where it's $37,258, but in the memo it's $71,587?
Those total expenses. So there were expenses to remove the structure. There was expenses for, as I said, an LSP to make sure any hazardous materials were removed. There was a contractor that came in and removed all of the trash in the back of the house, because in addition to the structure that was burned, there were complaints and health code violations. So that was remediated. And then there are legal expenses. And so everything totals up to a little over $71,000. In the middle of the process, the owner requested a stay from our injunction. That delayed things. So we had a contractor that mobilized, and then the contractor had to demobilize, and they had to remobilize. So all those expenses, unfortunately, are going to be borne by the owner. So it's a totality of all the expenses to deal with the Board of Health issues, the environmental issues, the structural issues. And when you remove something that's attached to a domicile, we're required to fix that so that the building envelope of that structure is sound. That work had to be done as well. So that's the total, is a little over 71,000.
Well, thank you for answering quickly. The fourth question is, has this been done before on any other site, residential site?
Yeah, I tore a building down several years back on Milk Porridge. I did one up on Green Street. We only do it as a last resort. It's usually as a result of some sort of a structure fire or an extreme situation. But it's, again, we try to work with property owners. If I have to do the work, I have to pay prevailing wages. So that bill represents, prevailing wages. A private homeowner, a private sector individual could do this work much cheaper than we can, because we have to follow all the public procurement laws. So yeah, we've done it. I think I've done it 4 times in the 19 years that I've been here.
Okay, well then that would answer one of this other questions that I have, or how does it set a precedent? The 8 apartment house on Maple Street that caught fire recently, lost one of the tenants in the fire, unfortunately, also needs to be raised and the debris removed for health and safety reasons. and the owner passed away a few months ago. The building is sitting there and tarps flowing in the wind and everything else. How will that piece of property be resolved?
Yeah, sure. So in those situations, if the structure isn't an immediate public safety issue in that it could fall down. So this structure has been inspected. It can, in theory, be rebuilt and fixed. It did not need to be removed immediately. Sometimes we have a fire and we'll have like the R&T fire in the center. The next day we had a company out there removing the debris. There was clearly nothing left to be salvaged. So again, we try to work with the owners or the heirs and give them some time to figure out what they're doing. So my understanding, and I have a meeting with the building inspector coming up to discuss this property specifically, is just to determine whether or not they're willing and able to move forward. But there's a difference between and something that is unattractive and something that is a immediate public safety issue. I will just say this: when we go to court for these things, the court does not want the town removing people's homes or structures, and it is very sympathetic to a property owner, and will give them what can be excruciating amounts of time to remedy or fix a property. So that's the case with that.
All right, I guess one last comment about that. The 101, a homeowner in a residential neighborhood built an illegal two-bay service garage on his residential property. I understand from the building inspector that they tried several times to get that taken care of, and it just didn't get taken care of. Resulting fire came, the town did pay for the fire crew to come out, and the demo company removed the debris, and they rebuilt the outside of the house, removed the waste. But the tax getting on a lien, there's already a lien from 2019 taxes of over $5,000, and the house was a homestead on it. So how are we going to really get any monies back on it? And I'm kind of surprised. I've never known that the Appropriations Committee Reserve Fund could be used for this sort of thing.
Well, as I said, usually the appropriation reserve is held to deal with unforeseen overages, typically in snow and ice. That's how it historically is used. And sometimes we've used it to cover in the past some special education costs where, a student moved in and the school committee or the school department didn't have funds for the required for the student. But in terms of 101 Colburn Street, the town has that property in tax title and is moving into foreclosure. Again, the last thing we want to do is take private property. We're not in that business. So it is a lengthy process to do that. But that property is in tax title and is moving into foreclosure. If at any point in time, a homeowner or a property owner wants to redeem their property, even when you're all the way down well into foreclosure, the court will always let them do that if they have the funds. And again, we're not in the business of taking people's property. It is a absolute and literal last resort. So, but the town will get its money. We always do.
It sounds like a private eye. We always get our man. All right, and then I have a couple questions about the planning board costs for their litigation. First was neither one of the, or I don't know if all three suits have actually been settled. So, and it was taken up in executive session. So I'm kind of surprised to see it being discussed now if the suits haven't been settled, because when Anza was going on, no conversation could happen about Anza because it hadn't been settled yet.
Well, we're not discussing the suits themselves or the pros and cons or the merits of our case. We're discussing the budget that's necessary to support the legal expenses of those suits. That's the difference.
Okay, and then the other question I have is then what are the legal fees that came from the lawsuit with the AAB and the subsequent appeal of their decision regarding the Aspet Park rebuild for the handicapped accessibility?
I'd have to look those up, but those costs were minimal. We went and met with the AAB in Boston for a few hours and a little bit of follow-up after that. It never went to litigation. The AAB decided that the town, it made more sense for us to work together, which was what we had proposed to begin with.
All right, well, okay.
All
All
set,
right,
Lisa?
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we have one more hand up from Carrie Martinek. And again, this is for comments on the approval of year-end transfers item. Carrie.
Hello, Carrie Martinek, 16 Hemlock Drive.
Hi.
Also a member of the planning board, thus my comments. It would be interesting to see obviously all the boards have lawsuits. So in terms of what breaks the camel's back, it would be interesting to see what the lifetime cost of ANZA, Marlboro Sewer, the ADA compliance lawsuits are. Certainly they're not inexpensive, whether they come from different funds or not. It would be interesting to have a transparent breakdown of what the lifetime cost is of those suits, and also the ZBA lawsuits, which I think oftentimes falls in the hands of residents. And we certainly hear residents, well, for ANZA anyway, paying upwards of $600,000 of their own money. So no, it's an expense for all. I'd also want to take this minute to suggest the board consider hiring a land use lawyer for the land use board so that we have the right expertise, and perhaps that would help cut down on costs. And I also thought the comment about getting advice in advance was interesting, as that's not truly the environment that I feel has been fostered from my perspective. So I just wanted to weigh in on that and suggest a few things, and perhaps take a transparent look at all of our legal fees versus just one of the boards. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Carrie.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. So with regard to SA Farms and ANZA, the town was made whole by an earmark from the state for all those legal expenses. As I said, the ABA cases was minimal, a few $1,000s of appearance and filing. And then it's just a smattering of stuff across the board. And we have discussed the issue of hiring a land use lawyer. That has been done. So.
Yeah, I think as those cases wind down, it may make sense for the board to sort of do a postmortem as far as process goes, and see if, and I know before my time on the board, some of that was discussed, but to take another look afterwards and see if there's anything just we as a town, all boards, staff, et cetera, might be able to do differently with any.
Yeah, I mean, we have as you know, because I brief you on ongoing litigation, which is different than consultation. But we have 5 cases with the planning board. We have the Marlboro case that's been ongoing that we're waiting. It's done. We're waiting for, and that's pretty much it. As I said, ANZA, when we were able to get the Attorney General's office to take over the SA Farm situation, that pretty much eliminated our expenses there. So we don't have much in the way ever of litigation ongoing. So,
Kristen.
I just wanted to clarify that I understand the comments are supposed to be about the finance and paying bills that we're about to approve getting paid. But the planning board works really hard to make sure that they're representing residents. And I'm pretty sure that when they get sued, it's not up to them. It's up to the petitioner, right? It's up to the person who owns the land to bring a case. So I think we want to make sure we're looking at this from the right point of view, basically. It really is not a planning board decision intending to get sued. And it's just some of the language this evening has sounded just a little mixed up. Maybe it's just in my head, but I just wanted to acknowledge that no one wants to get sued. I certainly wouldn't enjoy it very much at all. And if someone is speaking up on behalf of residents, if they're elected and they feel like that's what they were put in the job to do, which is pretty much what I'm doing every time we have a meeting, I think it's important to acknowledge that that takes courage, and it's not an easy thing. And if they did the easy thing, then it wouldn't always go well, people in elected positions can't always do the easy thing. And I think it's important to see that. And it's also important for a town administrator to be able to be really good with money and balancing budgets, which we're lucky to have that. So
Just through the chair, there's no comment on the merits of the cases. It's just an expense that we need to cover. Merits of the cases have been discussed in executive session, and that's not the intent here today.
Okay, it's just you mentioned it several times, so it does come across that way. So if it was just me who it came across to that way, I just needed to just mention that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kristen. Anybody else have any questions? All right. I'll entertain a motion regarding the year-end transfers.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move we vote to approve the fiscal year 2022 year-end transfers as presented in the 24th June memo from the town administrator.
Second.
Motion made by Scott, seconded by Julianne. Any further discussion? Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
And Kristen?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. You've got the transfers, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda is the town administrator's review. As discussed at our last meeting, I collected the reviews from the 4 other members. I did not participate in the review because I was not a voting member of the Board of Selectmen during most of the review period, but I did all of the consolidation and comments and everything like that. I sent that off to John a little while ago. And I want to congratulate John on a 4.0, which I think is an excellent rating, given that we've got a very diverse board with members with a lot of experience and members with less experience. So I think you've got a lot to be proud of, John. I did ask the members of the board if anyone wanted to sponsor a motion to not renew your contract. No one stepped forward, thus there is nothing on your agenda, and I think I can presumptively congratulate you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I think I'm very happy that you'll be with us for another 3 years. And I did send around a consolidated, also in the agenda packet, all of the comments, and I did my best to include all of the comments. One member did get in touch over the weekend and asked me to add another sentence to one of them. So on page 4, there is one other that is not in the packet, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to put here we go. On page 4, there's a sentence that starts with strives to constructively and responsibly assist citizens and groups, etc. I have added that upon request by the member that submitted this, adding to the very end of that, or otherwise unsatisfied with the response, period, maintains professionalism in his interactions with members of the public, period. So that is the final one that I would like to entertain a motion to approve the review, unless anyone has any comments before making such a motion. Okay, Jason.
I can't find my camera.
Yeah, I see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to say that, John, thank you very much for another year of, in my opinion, very, very excellent fiscal management and operations management for everything across the town. These last couple of years have been extraordinarily difficult years for you and for all of town staff going through the COVID environment. It's necessarily required cutbacks in the budget for various items. To take a conservative stance and not knowing what the future would bring. And additionally, it's, diverted a lot of time and energy to other initiatives for that and caused other work that's been in progress to be delayed temporarily, at least, for that reason. And so I just appreciate the continuing dedicated effort over the entire fiscal year. Last couple of fiscal years to just keep us on track, keep us well positioned financially to be able to have the flexibility to adapt to whatever changing conditions bring us. And I look forward to another year. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
I'll add that I don't envy anyone that has to work for 5 bosses that potentially change every year. And that's a hard job unto itself. And I would encourage board members that haven't discussed prior reviews or even have, but have any constructive suggestions on how potentially the comments or ratings might improve in future years, so John can adapt to our changing membership, to make an appointment to talk directly with John, either on your own or with me or with any pair you want, obviously not three of us at the same time. That will help us work better in the coming year. If no one, Kristen.
So one of the interesting things that I learned when I was watching the video you recommended from the Mass Municipal Association about reviewing your town administrator was that it's a very unusual situation to have your review done in public. Super awkward. And
You get used to it, sort of.
I guess you've been doing it for a while, but I thought about that for a while, and I think all my answers got nicer after that. Just kidding. No, but it does. It is a very awkward, potentially situation, and I think we've been handling it well, and I appreciate the fact that you do manage it. Also, though, it seemed like some towns do the assistant town administrator also by the Board of Selectmen, but we don't do that. Is that?
No, that's
some
my.
towns do it that way, or what did I get
Yeah.
that wrong?
Well, you got to be careful because every town is organized differently. Some are by bylaw, some are by charter, and who the appointing authority is. So I'm the appointing authority for the assistant, and as I am for most of the staff. So I would do that evaluation. But if I may, through the chair, just I would be remiss. First of all, thank you. I appreciate the feedback, and I think we have a lot to be proud of. It's been another great year. I have to tell you, these last year and a half or 2 years have been probably the two of the most difficult as a public manager. Without a doubt, they were the two most difficult. And I've been through a lot of recessions and various situations. And I just want to publicly thank our department heads and our staff. I don't think people realize what a crackerjack team this town has. I'm just going to share one quick story with you. The fire chief loves to do after action hot washes where, you go through if there's an incident or problem and you go through and what could you have done better? What could you improve on? What would we change? And so we did one recently for COVID. It's been, 2 years looking back and all the different stages, what we could have done differently, how could we have improved? And first of all, as you know, I believe Northborough staff and departments, just tremendous job all around. But the thing that came out of that exercise was it was absolute chaos. The state didn't know what they were doing. The Department of Public Health didn't know what it was doing. The CDC didn't know what it was doing because it was unfolding in real time. And so as a result, we didn't know what we were doing. We couldn't know what we were doing at many of these stages. But the one thing that held true throughout that entire process, and this is where the credit absolutely goes to the department heads and the staff, is everybody said, well, how did we manage and what was the upside of all this? And it came back to the relationships. We have a professional staff that gets along. They like each other. They work well. As the fire chief is fond of saying, nobody's throwing sand in the sandbox. But the relationships going into this emergency, the staff and the relationships were strong, including the boards and the committees working together. Because those relationships were so strong, we were able to deal with all of these other external issues and focus on those and not worry about having issues or problems in our own house. Now, not going to throw stones, but if your organization is in really good shape and you run into an emergency situation, you'll get through it. And there's always things that you can do better. But if your organization isn't running well and people aren't getting along and aren't on the same page, all that stuff comes out while you're trying to deal with this external threat. And I'm just really pleased and thankful for the great staff that we have and the wonderful job and the dedicated people that work for this town, because I get to take credit for a lot of this stuff. But really, it's the staff. That's when the rubber hits the road, and that's where they're the ones that make us all look great. And we have some wonderful, phenomenal staff that absolutely killed it for you guys and for this community over the last 2 years. And I just can't publicly thank them enough. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments or questions, Julianne?
I just want to say what I say after every one of these evaluations, as long as I've been here. I firmly believe that the tool we use needs to be updated and reevaluated. I didn't watch the entire webinar, but one of the great ideas that came out of that was a 360 evaluation, having sort of impartial people participate. Our lack of ability to get information was a problem for me, and I really plead that we, at some point before the next evaluation, look at this tool and see if we want to use it. And congratulations, John. You did a great job. You and the staff deserve a lot of credit, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that the residents in town also deserved a lot of credit. They hung in there, they got vaccinated, they did what they had to do. So let's not forget about them. Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Any other questions, Scott?
Yeah, just a follow-up to Julianne. And Julianne, this will help us, thinking ahead to next review break. Just can you describe like one piece of the eval form that was really like a sticking point, and then I can highlight, focus on that, and then think ahead.
Yeah. So personnel management, justifiably our ability to talk to staff is limited, but there's no survey that goes out, no anonymous survey, so we can get more information about that. I think that's the one that really strikes me as being something we have to take a good look at, and how we get the information. We don't have exit interviews. Also, I do like this idea of the 360. How do any of us deal with people in business, the schools, everyone that the town administrator, and it comes down to us also. How are we doing?
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, because I was able to have the conversations with quite a few staff members, but going beyond that, I guess that's a question. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can let me know how you did that. So.
I think
you'll have to talk to staff when I randomly walk into their office and they're like, "Oh, this guy's here again."
Yeah, I think we should at least have a discussion about whether this is still the best format to use. I know this is referenced in your contract, John, so we'd have to have a discussion with you about changing it. That is not something the board should do unilaterally, but do in coordination with John. From my perspective, as we start to add goals, which is our next or two more agenda items down the list, I think those should be part of the review process also. That's not for discussion really tonight, but just piggybacking on what Julianne suggested is, I think in another couple of months, we should start to have a discussion about the review process, so that if we are going to make any changes, that those changes are in place before we begin the review process next time around. There are no other questions. I do have one hand raised from the public. I'll bring in Tim Kalin. Tim Kalin is using an older. I need to unfortunately promote you to panelist, Tim, because you've got an old version of Zoom, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And again, I would ask that any comments be limited to the discussion item here, which is the town administrator review. Hi, Tim. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thanks for having me on. Tim Kalin, 42 Davis Street. I just wanted to thank the board for renewing John's contract. In my opinion, it was the only decision to come to. I think John's done a fantastic job. I just wanted to comment also, as I've learned in working with various boards and committees, that there is a lack of talent available for municipalities to hire. And the fact that we hold on to the wonderful talent that we have in town, that they don't leave and go to other communities, I think is high praise for the leadership and the career opportunities that are available in Northborough. So I just wanted to thank John and thank everybody for renewing his contract.
Thanks, Tim. And I have one more hand up, Rudiger Volk. Again, and the same situation, Rudiger, I've got to promote you to panelist because I've got an old version of Zoom, and I'd ask you to limit your comments to the town administrator's review. You could unmute your microphone, please.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for taking my call. A couple of things as a newcomer, so I will address it as more as a newcomer. A little bit disturbing the applaud from the board to the administrator. I personally, I have also, during all the meetings, also quite a nice impression about the administrator, but not to forget that he get a salary also. I mean, and the applaud for the staff is the same. What I want to applaud is more the committee, and in his achievements report which the administrator gave, he basically put out all the achievements of the committees which didn't get paid. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I would like, as a customer, I see myself as a taxpayer customer, then also a competition, so that the administrator runs the town as a business, and it's not. There's a budget, and the budget is always in the black. That's nice, but it should be also, where is there any chance of tax reduction? Is this really necessary?
I apologize for interrupting. Do you have any comments relative to the review itself that the board did for the administrator?
Not, but it's. I heard that the report or the it should be every year, and it was not done every year. So could it be done every year? So that's next year is automatically placing in it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the anticipation is it will be done every year.
Okay.
All set?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the administrator's review as presented.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board vote to approve the town administrator's review for 2022, fiscal year 2022, as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made by Jason, seconded by Scott. Any other discussions? Okay. Jason, how do you vote?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Approved. John, congratulations again. Next up is the ARPA discussion on public input sessions and next steps. This is literally an open-ended discussion on everything. So we had a fantastic, at least from my perspective, meeting back a few weeks ago with the public at the high school, and we've received many emails. Our next step is to do something with all of that information and decide, do we want to leave for example, the email address, do we want to leave that open for a while, close that down? And what do we want to do next? We obviously have a lot of work to do to consolidate it. That was made easier by the meeting minutes of our input meeting on the 16th, which has that all nicely typed up already. So I'm just curious to hear from the board as far as how they think things are going and what we should do next. Kristen.
So one of the suggestions was in an email from a woman who suggested that well, one of our options, which they've done in other towns, is form an ad hoc committee of residents and some members of town boards, and have them make, we'll go through all the recommendations and maybe prioritize them or organize them or even recommend certain recommendations. I wondered how my fellow board members felt about that.
Anybody want to comment on that or have anything additional to add? Jason.
Yes. I don't know, my feeling is that the authority for making the decisions about ARPA funding ultimately rests with this board. And I think that many of the suggestions that have come in, I think are familiar to us now, well understood. I think we would benefit from having that information consolidated into a nice summarized form of all the various categories, all the various suggestions, and some categorization. But I don't think there's a need for an intermediate step to delegate some of that work to. I think this committee is capable of doing that evaluation, making those decisions. We've had a public input process. I imagine we'll continue to receive public input, but at this point, I think that it's a narrow window here, and we want to start taking some steps to make some decisions. And it might be difficult decisions to make when choosing from, among some of the options. But my feeling is that this committee is perfectly capable of doing that with assistance from town staff to compile, summarize, categorize the information.
Julianne.
Yeah, I think that idea would have worked if we had started this early on in the process. But at this point, I would like to make sure that if any board or committee felt that they lost revenue or had extra burdens put on them, I'd really like to hear from them. And I don't know whether that means as liaisons, we reach out to them or just send a blanket email to all towns and committees and boards to make sure that we are hearing from them, because they do in essence represent a broad spectrum of town, I think. Can we add ideas now?
Add new ARPA funding ideas, or I really want to discuss public input, so the next steps.
Public input. Okay, so my feeling is that we keep the email open until we've gone down to half the amount of money or something. I think and any communication is helpful, and as long as we can keep that open is my preference.
Scott.
Yeah, I agree with Julian. Keep the input email open. I mean, there's no reason to turn that off. And continue to receive information. I think for some of the ideas, I think the funding sources aren't necessarily ARPA. So to begin to categorize those ideas and align them with existing work or existing responsibilities, whether that be other boards, committees, commissions, departments, programs that we're getting grant money for already, I think we can move forward on quite a few of those and not, it'd be good to get additional organizational input, but I don't think we need it, as Jason said. So I think we can move forward with quite a few of these with the resources we have, and we'll see which ones. Like I said, many of them might not even be funded through ARPA. So I think I've said it before, is if we keep getting input on unmet community needs, I want to hear all of that and get it aligned with the appropriate department or board, committee, commission. And then as we go through those steps and specific projects are defined, then we tailor the budget source to the appropriate project. Some of that's going to be out of free cash, some of that's going to be out of CPC, some RCBA funds, some of that's going to be out of ARPA, some of that's going to be, actually a lot of it's going to be out of grants. So I don't think an additional committee helps us in that respect. I think we've got mechanisms where projects come through, expenses come through, whether it's financial planning or CPC, things like that. So we've got built in to the system a lot of ways to define these projects, get them evaluated, and then bring them forward for decisions. So I'm pretty comfortable that we can move forward on a lot of these and not delay.
Yeah, I agree. I think given where we are in the timeline, my preference is to not involve another committee or outside agency. I think, we've been learning a lot about this. I think we can take a really good stab at prioritizing and funding some of these things. And I agree, we may make connections for things that are not, but we can solve without using ARPA funds. And I think the goal is to identify those needs and solve them. ARPA just happens to be one of the tools at our disposal, and right now a very unique and well-funded tool. I'd like to leave that email address open until we've committed the last penny of ARPA, because some idea may come up later, either that hasn't come up already or for a need that hasn't even arisen. So I'd say just keep that open, and as people think of ideas, they should do that. I know at least some boards and committees have already been discussing ways that they might request use of ARPA funds or other funds. For example, I also sit on the Library Board of Trustees, and there are some projects that we're in the process of gathering details for that we haven't put in a request because we don't have all the details, but hopefully will in the near future. And that's just one example. That there may be others, and that's another reason to leave it open. But at the same time, we've gone through a tremendous exercise, and we should start working on it. And there may be things in there that in the near future we may want to fund due to their timeliness for one reason or another, whether they be capital items that we want to act on, or they be social related programs or anything else, because the need continues and is exacerbated over time. There are all sorts of issues. So one way or another, we've got to start putting everything on a list, identifying dollar amounts, identifying potential revenue sources if for things that are not ARPA, noting who made the request or which people made the request, so that we might be able to go back and seek additional information. And I would like to, at some point in our next meeting or two, start to allocate some of those funds so that we can put the money to use. Scott.
Yeah, another thought that what Julianne said about departments or other committees, bring ideas forward. I guess that would be a potential if for the general residents, if they've got an idea but maybe haven't fleshed it out completely. Just having that idea and not knowing where to go to, I think we could very easily help align them with the appropriate board, committee, or commission, and then that group can help them flesh out the idea, bring it forward as a more full project. So it'd say if there's a resident that has an idea in a certain area, we can get them aligned, whether it's Board of Health or school committee or whatever, to help determine what the appropriate action could be taken against that unmet need.
John, did you have any ideas or input on this item?
No, I've provided the board with a couple of memos. One most recently, just before your last input session. I think my thoughts is we have existing master plans and capital plans, and so I think those need to be somewhat deferential to those, and again, taking in input. If there are needs that are unmet, we should talk about them. The concern always, you hear me at every meeting talk about sustainability. I know this seemed to like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's one-time funding. It's about a 2% increase over, for 2 years, over 2 years, 2% to 2%. just need to be careful, how we use it. My preference would be also that we not get into, small $500, $1,000, like administratively, pick a few significant projects or initiatives that matter to the community and move forward with those. But I think we've got everything that we need, frankly. Just a matter of pull it together and start to make some decisions.
Kristen.
Would we be giving a little more money to the Be Well group? Or is that something that's on the table? Because like John said, we shouldn't be deciding the smaller amount budget items, but that seems to be a good group that could do that if it's sort of the kind of thing that would be under that umbrella anyway. And I know we give them $100,000. I don't know what's left.
They're good for a while. They don't need any more funding at the moment, but if things heat up and a lot of project requests come forward, I think that's one of those where we kind of have to play it by ear at the moment. And I do appreciate that, Kristen, at the moment, because they're doing a great job, but at the moment they're fine.
Okay, so you'll just keep us, are you our contact with them?
Yep.
All right.
Julianne, did I see your hand up? There's your hand.
Yes. So actually, I would like a little more information. And one specifically would be, because we talk about budget shortfalls during COVID, and if we could get a breakdown, Jason Little, I'm sorry to ask you for this because I know you're working on these reports, but what was left that was not covered by the CARES Act or FEMA or any of the state or federal money that
we still don't know that. That's going to play out for a while. Remember what I said, reimbursement for storms, sometimes it comes a year later. So that's going to be an ongoing flowing process.
Well, maybe we could have like a general idea of things that weren't covered that are outstanding. That would be helpful. It doesn't have to be tonight, but as we move forward with this decision making. Jason, I see you now.
He popped on screen, so
Oh, yeah.
he loves talking about grant compliance. He's having a great time.
Well, obviously, I hope any of the ARPA ideas are all going to be compliant with federal grant rules, because I mean, one thing to remember that it is a federal grant in the end, so we can't get too far flung with what gets done with it, because we will have to be subject to audit and so forth with these funds. I just add that we are going through the process of, we went through first of all is the CARES Act. We did file a claim with FEMA and we did get that money already, but that was really just the initial claim from reopening buildings at the beginning of COVID. Those expenses were through September of 2020. And as you may recall, I think I've mentioned on here before that FEMA was the first claim that how the pandemic was being paid for, and they're probably the worst agency to deal with in terms of getting money. So in the end, we filed a claim for $92,000, and we got approved for $28,000. Then we appealed some of their decisions and ended up getting $58,000. Along the way, the CARES Act was approved. The town's allocation was $1.3 million from what was called the Coronavirus Relief Fund municipal program. So out of that, we were allocated $1.3 million, but that was turned into a reimbursement program. So we got the money in a drawdown fashion where we requested money, and we had to report all of our expenses. And along the way, right before, on the cusp of the closing of the CARES Act program, which was October of 2021, which seems like just yesterday, but they changed the rules whereby we could reapply our FEMA expenses that we had been incurring. So in the end, we ended up using most of our allocation. We spent $1.1 million. So up to that point, through October, December of this year, we really didn't have any costs that have been uncovered at this point. There's still an audit process going on. I've heard of some other towns going through their CARES Act, their final closeouts for CARES being audited, and some costs being clawed back because they weren't approved. But I mean, we're mostly in the clear. I don't think any of the expenses that we put through, obviously they were legitimate. I looked at every single one of them, as did John, through our process of paying bills. But we're probably out of the clear with that. So in terms of uncovered costs, the next thing that we're going to be facing is filing claims for the vaccination, the testing that's gone on since the close of the CARES Act. So right now, we don't really know what's not covered because we have to go through a very cumbersome process of filing those final claims with FEMA. And we have a few more days left till the disaster period ends. It goes through July 1st. So we could have more expenses that crop up, but it's unlikely at this point. So we need to do that homework.
Thank you. And so basically this is really good news. Mostly everything was covered, right?
Like I said, to this point, yes, our costs that were through December have generally been covered. So like I said, we are going to be going through the process of consolidating all these costs and putting them through to FEMA and seeing what will be covered for what remained after that.
Thanks an awful lot.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, just one comment to keep in mind, everybody, is that the federal government gave this ARPA funding in part to deal with direct expenses and issues with COVID. And for, how many times have we sort of opened the doors and windows and said, hey, we're back open, everything is back to normal, whatever that is. And then, just this past January, we almost locked down again. So something to keep in mind is I do believe strongly, as I've said in my communications, we do need to maintain a reserve to deal with actual direct COVID related expenses that may pop up again. At some point we'll start to ease off of that, but I don't anticipate if there's another variant and that things get difficult again, the federal government's going to say, well, you've got your money, use it. So we just want to make sure, and I don't really have a date in mind. I just want to caution that we need to have a certain reserve. We've been extremely lucky and productive in obtaining grants to fund most things. So we've had great success there, but we want to have a little bit on reserve, but make sure that we don't hold too much that we can't spend it before the deadline. So just something to keep in mind.
Yes, thanks for the details on that. So I think what I'm hearing is as next steps, leave the email address open. We've got to work on consolidating and collecting all of this information. I will volunteer myself and perhaps Julianne as vice chair, if you're willing to work with me on that, and certainly with staff. Maybe I don't want to put too much on your plate directly, John, but maybe somebody in your office could also help us out as we go through and just collecting the information. No decisions as part of that, in the hopes that for our July 18th meeting we would have some summary information back, and we can decide again whether there are next steps or whether we want to begin funding things. And I know there are some things that are becoming more pressing. So it wouldn't surprise me if John included some requests for that meeting for us to consider some expenses then. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yeah, sounds great.
Julianne.
Well, one of the items that came up at the meeting was the community meals. Does anybody remember what their deadline was? I felt like it was coming up really soon, and I wonder if we could help them out.
If I remember, sorry, go ahead, John.
I'm sorry. I should ask to be recognized, Mr. Chairman.
That's
I apologize.
If I remember correctly, they've said recently that they're currently funded through September.
Okay.
And they're always collecting additional funds. John, is that roughly consistent with what you've heard?
Yeah, through September. The other thing is working with the Board of Health. There are a number of grants and sources of funding that's actually, I think we would have very good success at obtaining. Obviously, we want to make sure the program continues, but if we want to leverage, every grant, there's a lot of money floating around right now. So we want to leverage that as best we can and hang on to the funds for the things that we can't get grants for. But they should be good through September. So we've got plenty of time.
Okay. And Julianne, are you okay with me volunteering you to work with me on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. I don't know if there are any other comments from the board. We do have one hand up in the audience. All right, I'll bring in Tim Kalin. Again, old Zoom, so you're a panelist. Congratulations. Tim, go ahead.
Hi, Tim Kalin, 42 Davis Street. I like this. I can call in like 10, 12 times a meeting.
We did this just for you, Tim.
Now I don't have to go through that pesky election. Since the Diversity and Inclusion Committee isn't up and running at this point, I just wanted to remind the board that part of the recommendations that the Diversity and Inclusion Committee put forth in January was an ask for approximately $150,000 to hire a consulting firm to come in and help the new Diversity and Inclusion Committee come up with strategies and implement those strategies. And we asked for that money to come out of the ARPA funds. So I would hope that the board will show that it is serious about diversity and inclusion in the community and give the committee, the new committee, the financial resources that it has asked for. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim, if you haven't already, please send an email to that ARPA input address to make sure that we've got that on our list. I'm sure we do.
That was included in the memo I put together for the board.
Okay.
So the details of the study as well and the cost.
Fantastic. Any other questions or comments on ARPA before we continue the meeting? Okay, we will move along. We have no votes to take on the ARPA at this time. And our last real item on the agenda is discussion of goals for the town administrator. So I'd asked everyone to come to the meeting with 1 to 3 goals in mind. We talked about some possibles at our last meeting. My hope is that we can have a few discussed a little bit more in depth tonight, and hopefully at our next meeting be able to potentially vote on a small but refined set of goals for John for the coming year. Okay, who wants to go first? Julianne.
I'll go first. And I apologize. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you were looking for, but well, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is traffic. So whether it's forming a traffic safety committee, just addressing that problem and, seeing what solutions we can come up with, I think is a goal that is appropriate at this time. The other thing is economic development, and it's been talked about for a long time and suggested, and I think that it's also an appropriate goal. And my third thing would be to continue any action items with green communities, but to involve Sustainable Northborough more and make a little more progress in that area. So those are my 3 suggestions.
Thank you, Julianne. I'm waiting for another hand to go up, or I'll just start calling on people. Jason, I'm calling on you.
Well, okay. To suggest 3 things. First thing I think at the top of my list is the fire station project. I think it's a big ticket capital item. The economy is not going in the direction we would prefer at the moment, and it's important for us to kind of close the loop on this project and try to, bring the schedule in to whatever extent we can in order to move forward with it. So that would be, in my mind, a first major thing to focus on. Second thing would be one thing that I think has become clear is that and I've said this a couple of times, it's a very lean organization in town hall. And some of the problems that we have are just too much work falling on too few shoulders. And so I would support the notion of a staffing study that would kind of do a comprehensive look across all town departments, taking into account some of the initiatives that we think we're going to be moving forward with in the future, and make a determination about what additional level of staffing we might need in order to accomplish those objectives, and at what cost. As you know, John has frequently said, and it certainly has made an impression on me, municipal operations, recurring expenses, it's not something to take lightly. Once you make that commitment, it's very difficult to undo it. But perhaps we have reached the point where additional staffing in a few key positions would provide a lot of leverage to what John and remaining staff can accomplish. And then as a third item, I actually have a couple of them highlighted, but perhaps the sidewalk master plan and complete streets program is something that has gotten a lot of attention in town. A lot of people seem to have that as a concern, and it seems like with the complete streets, the initial step we've taken and the approval we've gotten to kind of move forward in that direction and see what improvements might be made. That seems to be something that I think the community would benefit from.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who would like to go next? And I will add, it is perfectly appropriate, perhaps even requested, to simply echo any other items. We don't have to add 3 that we haven't talked about, because then we've got a lot of goals to consolidate.
I'll go next.
Sure, Scott.
So the easier going third, because I also had on my list trying to bring forward as quickly as possible on the fire station. We lost time on that, and just to try to get that phased appropriately into the schedule and be able to deal with the financial impacts of that and the improvement to public safety that provides. I guess kind of pivoting off of what Jason said about the complete streets and sidewalks, I guess going back to the elements that are coming out of Master Plan Implementation Committee, where being in support of the downtown revitalization and the infrastructure improvements in terms of streets and sidewalks. Also in support of the staffing study to help look across the board that way. And then I think in previous bits, we talked about making these goals, extra and not just the normal business. And so I think not losing, focus on our financial policies and procedures. And so, yeah, we've got to do the budgeting anyway, but I think a 12th year of the budget award, is a nice goal to have. Let's continue to be recognized and awarded for the work we do. So it might be the normal business, but getting going above and beyond to get that recognition and award. I want to still strive for that that acknowledgement to the town. Those are the main items on my list.
Scott. Kristen, it's down to you. Well, and then me. I get the luxury of really going last.
Right. Okay, thanks. So I have, for a small one, change our name to Select Board. That's a good small one. And even Jason is smiling. Come on, everyone is smiling. Even Jason, I got a little smile out of him. That's one we all know how to do. We can check the box, get it done, be like, goal accomplished, yay. So that's a good
I'm not sure. I apologize for interrupting. I'm not sure if that's a goal for John or something. That's more more on us.
Yeah.
I agree with you. We got to do it. So
my goals were tonight you said for John, but when I wrote down homework, I wrote goal ideas. So I wasn't specifically thinking of for John.
That's fine.
So
that's fine.
It was kind of for all of us. So anyway, that's on us. I agree.
Yeah.
And then I had actually one of my goals was organize and synthesize the ARPA suggestions. So you've already decided who's doing that. So that's cool. So one of my other goals, and these do, I guess they're all of us. And I love the staffing study idea. So Julian mentioned sustainability, and then Jason mentioned the complete streets idea. And I wrote down walkability for the town and general sort of methods of getting places that aren't in a car, right? So also, I guess, bikeability. But I'm thinking our sustainability and complete streets and walkability, like they're kind of all connected. Mm-hmm. If you look at it from a certain perspective. So I think we're all kind of thinking on a lot of things that are easily connected. And then, like, we don't have to put everything in little boxes, right? And then I also had just being on the interview committee kind of alerted me to thinking about what kinds of people are on our boards and committees. So this is more me, I guess. With staff, it would be more John, but getting people who aren't straight white people to be on more boards and committees and more positions if we are hiring new staff here and there. Always have that be a consideration to get that perspective and not have it just be people on the DEI committee also. And then, okay. And then one other one that I don't know who is in charge of it, but a lot of people ask me about White Cliffs and I never know what to say. So if we could have, give Kristen an answer for that or a series of answers. And I heard Jillian actually had an update on that. They had a meeting and stuff. So that's great news. I look forward to hearing more about that. And I hope we can get that moving along. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Kristen. The three that I had are all echoed in some way, shape, or form by some of the others, which is great. I had downtown revitalization as one, which certainly ties in with economic development. And to some extent with walkability and other things like that. I look at downtown revitalization as a narrow but critical subset of the master plan and economic development. White Cliffs was on my list. I think that's a project that, we should dedicate some more of our energy and regular, a little bit more frequent discussion to get that done. And we don't know what done is with White Cliffs. I know people have all sorts of ideas, but we've got to move it forward. It's been sitting open for a few years. A couple of those years because of COVID, we really couldn't do anything. But I'd like to see us step up and then check that one off of the list before too long. And I had strategic planning, which is really staffing study. It's really the same thing. So I think we've got, obviously, and these are all good things. If something doesn't make the goal list, it doesn't mean it doesn't get done. John will be doing a lot of, it's going to be doing a lot of things anyway. And these are the things particularly that we want to keep an extra close eye on and have that fall into the review at the end of the year. So that's how to think about this. And I'm not sure exactly what to do next, but John, I don't know if you had any comments or any thoughts, or if you're just going to let the board hash this one out on our own.
No, I think it's interesting. I mean, I try to package this stuff up for you guys, both what we've accomplished, but, if you look at the list of things that we're going to be working on, the reality is, the only one of the big things that we do need to do that nobody mentioned is the town offices feasibility study and taking back 4 West Main. That's going to be a significant undertaking. Whether or not you list it as a goal, it's still going to take up a big chunk of our time. You've got the budget, the GFOA, fire station, historic, the White Cliffs reuse, Town hall feasibility study. I know you don't care, but we got to wrap up 5 collective bargaining agreements, but that's day to day. I get that. But it is a lot of the day to day. Sidewalk master plan and complete streets, dealing with the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as all the reporting and stuff that we need to wrap up, strategic planning, and, an organizational wide staffing study. I mean, those are all things that I kind of put together for you guys. So, it's always helpful to get a focus of what you see as being the most important things. But I think basically you've all hit on everything that I've kind of put together for you. And in some respects, they're all important and they're all going to need to get done. I think what I hope the board takes away is that, there's a lot on the plate. And as we get going during the course of the year, new things pop up. And, we just need to be cognizant of adding additional significant projects when we have all of these things that are ongoing, whether or not each individual board member feels that it's a priority. These things all need to get done. So of all the things in here, long-term, what I think will reduce frustration for you and me and staff is to get some agreement on the resources, and a staffing study needs to be done. We're long overdue for that. We can have as many boards and committees or special projects as the town would like, but we just can't keep stacking things up on the limited staff that we have. And I think one of the things that you're going to find, hopefully if we do proceed with a full staffing study, is one of the things you're going to find is just how much bang you get for your current tax bill buck for the staff that you have. They're very, very productive. But, if we're going to expand, we're really at limits here. And I think that's something you need to take a good hard look at. The other thing, part of that staffing study is also an unlimited capacity to look at a couple of the way we're organized in a couple of places with a few departments should be looked at, as well as we're always talking about adding committees. At some point, we need to take a break and eliminate some of these defunct committees that meet once a year or every 2 years, that you have to go through the process of appointing people to, that they don't have anything really productive to do. And so we need to kind of, I think, clean out some of these committees if we're going to make room for new committees that people feel are important. So I think that staffing study and looking at a little bit of structure as well as board and committee composition, I think is be helpful. Which are really, ultimately, we need to align our resources with what we all agree to as being our priorities. And when those things aren't lined up, and this what happens when you get changes in boards, you're not aligned anymore, and that's when it starts to chafe and people aren't clear. Well, staff's not clear what they should be focusing on. Boards and committees aren't clear why certain things that they're important to them aren't being focused on. So it's a good process, and I think that with a little bit of strategic planning. One of the things I did want to talk to you about as well is I would like to see the board engage in a formal strategic planning process and goal setting process as an organization, because again, as a manager, what I'm always trying to do is get all the folks that I have to report to and work with pointed in the same direction and agreeing on what the priorities are. And so when that alignment isn't there, it just makes things a little bit more difficult. And obviously staff wants to be responsive. Board wants to get accomplished what you think are the priorities from the perspective of the residents. So we're all trying to get to the same place. We need a plan to do that. And that's my suggestion for the plan. So I hope we can have a conversation about that. I think it's short money and it doesn't need to be a massively elaborate process, but it's something that I think will help align the boards and committees with staff, and then identify resources that are necessary to get to where we want to be. And that's ultimately, that's what our collective jobs are. We're trying to get that alignment as an organization. And once you get that alignment, things go much smoother. So I appreciate the input, or being asked for my input.
Okay, I saw Julianne's hand up first.
So the strategic planning process sounds absolutely necessary. And obviously that means hiring a consultant or some group to come in and evaluate us. do the selectmen get to have input into that information that they gather?
Of course, of course. Yeah, the idea is to take, is to make sure that all the perspectives are being brought together and synthesized. And a big piece of it is, we have on all boards and committees, people with varying levels of expertise or experience. And so a big piece of it is getting agreement on information and process. And if you can't agree on the information, it's hard to have a process that's going to be fruitful. So it's all of that. It's taking the perspective of staff, boards, and committees, so as a role input from residents, and start to coalesce that alignment. And then you've got to match what it is you say you want to accomplish with realistic resources to get you there. And if you're not willing or able to align those resources, then you have to have subsequent discussions about tightening up what your priorities really are, because you can't do everything. And I think that if there's one thing I can tell you coming out of the last couple of years is we can't do everything. We do everything that's critical, but we can't just keep adding on new boards, committees, and new initiatives. We need to wrap some things up or move away from some things that maybe aren't adding a value in the opinion of the stakeholders. So it's a good process, a little bit of cleaning house, it's a little bit changing of focus. And I find it's a helpful exercise, especially when you have new board and committee members.
Kristen.
So does that are we just doing this at our regular meetings, or?
So my suggestion, and again, I'm happy to kind of package something up for your discussion. I have had some discussions with the Collins Center, UMass Collins Center. It's something that they do. There are a number of consultants that do this type of work. Thing is, I want to participate. I don't want to direct. It's not appropriate for the chairman to direct. The idea is we're all participants, and to bring all that in. But should you be looking for an independent third party to kind of facilitate this? And they can be as simple as what I would suggest is kind of a little dedicated retreat of the board.
That was my question. That's what
it's never really a retreat because we're a public entity, so you're always going to have looky-loos and apparently comments on everything on the agenda. So that's give me a hard time, Mitch. But no, to do a retreat and set some time aside to do this. There's a lot of background sort of compiling of information and getting everything together. And then there's a processing and a discussion component of it. And I just think it would be helpful to get us in a little bit better alignment.
That was that was why I brought it up.
It's not something you do as an add-on to a busy agenda, in my opinion.
No. And they mentioned it at this MMA video that I watched. And they did say that you can have it has to be an open meeting, but you do it in person and you don't allow public comment. So people can watch, but they can't interrupt. And
that would be my suggestion, that it would be a retreat for the board, and people can watch, as you say, but it can be distracting. The idea is trying to get us to some extent, it's a bit of a, do this with my staff. It's a bit of a team builder. It's a little bit of education in that, taking the time to listen to other perspectives, make sure that you have agreement on the information. If staff is telling you we're spending, 50% of our time on this, but you don't value it, or you don't think we should be spending that much time on it, we need to have that discussion. Mm-hmm. How much time is being spent? What are the priorities? Because on the other side, if we're going to be held accountable, you got to give us a fighting chance to reasonably meet the expectations. And we haven't, in fairness to some staff in some departments this last couple of years, we've just gotten by, and we're coming out of it. Everybody's still kind of recharging a little bit, trying to get our feet back underneath of us. Good time to maybe stop and take stock of, are we marching ahead at full speed in the direction we all say, we want to be going in?
Yeah.
That makes sense? Yeah, I think you'll find it helpful. I know the staff will find it helpful.
That would be great. Would the staff be there or are they just?
No, it's sort of a
benefit?
ground up, bubble up process, of kind of like what we do with our legislative priorities. You're kind of looking for the input of, really for the board, it's making sure that there's a good understanding of where we're spending our time and where our resources are currently committed and what those projects are. And then what do we want of things that we're doing that nobody values, that aren't critical to public safety or the organization, and maybe we drop a few of those. I think we have a lot of, as I mentioned, there's maybe some committees that could be combined. There's some committees that could be dissolved. There's some of these committees and work that we entertain, goes back to the 1970s that really don't have a very strong role, but we're spending time and energy on that. Maybe we can spend on some newer committees.
Thanks. That's great.
Well, I don't want to spend too much more time on any particular goal, although this has been very informative. I would suggest as next steps is I've written down everything that everyone suggested tonight. Maybe John, you and I can get together sometime over the next couple of weeks and start to review some of these things and see what makes sense as goals. We may come back at our next meeting with too many, and then the board can.
You're going to have too many goals because we have too many important projects. Yeah. Like I said, whether or not nobody mentioned the old town hall and the town hall feasibility study, it doesn't matter whether or not you have that as a goal. Right. That is going to take up a big chunk of time in the next year. It's unavoidable. So, yep. but I do appreciate knowing what you guys are focused on.
So at our next meeting, perhaps we can narrow it down and potentially approve them. Everyone good with that process?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. Thank you very much, everybody, for lots of wonderful discussion tonight. And is there any other business before us?
Other business this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. One last opportunity for public comment on any item. Oh, we have a taker. I'm glad I remembered that. Lisa Maselli, I'm bringing you in.
I know you're killing me over here, guys. You did a great job tonight. It was wonderful to see the conversation and the discussion. Congratulations. This is a lovely place to be. I'm so happy to see that happening. And I want to make a recommendation to remove the annual MMA Town Report Contest. It's been 12 years, really. You did a great job. I don't think you have to keep doing that over and over again. Move on, get something more important. That'll be your number one goal and start afresh. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Just for the record, we're legally required to produce an annual report every year. That's what we do. We don't do it for the award. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
We'll actually get fined if you don't produce an annual report.
Yeah. Let's see. I have already recognized Lisa. Lisa, your hand is still up. If you are not, if you don't have anything else, there we go. You lowered your hand. Okay. If there's nothing else, and there's nothing else from the board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
There we go. All right. I will say Jason made the motion and Julianne seconded it. Nothing personal. Scott, Jason, how do you vote?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Preston?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. The vote is unanimous. We are